Chapter 3 of Camille. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Rachel Linton. Camille by Alexandre Dumas Fils. Translated by Edmund Goss. Chapter 3. At 1 o'clock on the 16th I went to the Rue d'Antin. The voice of the auctioneer could be heard from the outer door. The rooms were crowded with people. There were all the celebrities of the most elegant impropriety, furtively examined by certain great ladies who had again seized the opportunity of the sale in order to be able to see, close at hand, women whom they might never have another occasion of meeting, and whom they envied perhaps in secret for their easy pleasures. The Duchess of F elbowed Mademoiselle A, one of the most melancholy examples of our modern courtesan. The Marquis de T hesitated over a piece of furniture, the price of which was being run high by Madame D, the most elegant and famous adulteress of our time. The Duke of Y, who in Madrid is supposed to be ruining himself in Paris, and in Paris to be ruining himself in Madrid, and who, as a matter of fact, never even reaches the limit of his income, talked with Madame M, one of the wittiest story-tellers, who from time to time writes what she says and signs what she writes, while at the same time he exchanged confidential glances with Madame de N, a fair ornament of the Champs-Élysées, almost always dressed in pink or blue, and driving two big black horses which Tony had sold her for 10,000 francs, and for which she had paid after her fashion. Finally, Mademoiselle R, who makes by her mere talent twice what the women of the world make by their dot, and 3 times as much as the others make by their amours, had come in spite of the cold to make some purchases, and was not the least looked at among the crowd. We might cite the initials of many more of those who found themselves, not without some mutual surprise, side by side in one room, but we fear to weary the reader. We will only add that everyone was in the highest spirits, and that many of those present had known the dead woman and seemed quite oblivious of the fact. There was a sound of loud laughter. The auctioneers shouted at the top of their voices. The dealers who had filled the benches in front of the auction table tried in vain to obtain silence in order to transact their business in peace. Never was there a noisier or a more varied gathering. I slipped quietly into the midst of this tumult, sad to think of when one remembered that the poor creature whose goods were being sold to pay her debts had died in the next room. Having come rather to examine than to buy, I watched the faces of the auctioneers, noticing how they beamed with delight whenever anything reached a price beyond their expectations. Honest creatures who had speculated upon this woman's prostitution, who had gained their 100% out of her, who had plagued with their writs the last moments of her life, and who came now after her death to gather in at once the fruits of their dishonourable calculations and the interest on their shameful credit. How wise were the ancients in having only one God for traders and robbers! Dresses, cashmeres, jewels were sold with incredible rapidity. There was nothing that I cared for, and I still waited. All at once I heard a volume beautifully bound, gilt-edged, entitled Manon Lescaut. There is something written on the first page. 10 francs. 12, said a voice after a longish silence. 15, I said. Why, I did not know. Doubtless for the something written. 15, repeated the auctioneer. 30, said the first bidder, in a tone which seemed to defy further competition. It had now become a struggle. 35, I cried in the same tone. 40, 50, 60, 100. If I had wished to make a sensation, I should certainly have succeeded, for a profound silence had ensued, and people gazed at me as if to see what sort of a person it was who seemed to be so determined to possess the volume. The accent which I had given to my last words seemed to convince my adversary. He preferred to abandon a conflict which could only have resulted in making me pay 10 times its price for the volume, and bowing, he said very gracefully, though indeed a little late, "I give way, sir." Nothing more being offered, the book was assigned to me. As I was afraid of some new fit of obstinacy which my amour propre might have sustained somewhat better than my purse, I wrote down my name, had the book put on one side, and went out. I must have given considerable food for reflection to the witnesses of this scene, who would no doubt ask themselves what my purpose could have been in paying 100 francs for a book which I could have had anywhere for 10, or at the outside 15. An hour later I sent for my purchase. On the first page was written in ink, in an elegant hand, an inscription on the part of the giver. It consisted of these words: Manon to Marguerite, humility. It was signed Armand Duval. What was the meaning of the word humility? Was Manon to recognize in Marguerite, in the opinion of M. Armand Duval, her superior in vice or in affection? The second interpretation seemed the most probable, for the first would have been an impertinent piece of plain speaking which Marguerite, whatever her opinion of herself, would never have accepted. I went out again and thought no more of the book until at night when I was going to bed. Manon Lescaut is a touching story. I know every detail of it, and yet whenever I come across the volume the same sympathy always draws me to it. I open it, and for the 100th time I live over again with the heroine of the Abbé Prévost. Now this heroine is so true to life that I feel as if I had known her, and thus the sort of comparison between her and Marguerite gave me an unusual inclination to read it, and my indulgence passed into pity, almost into a kind of love for the poor girl to whom I owed the volume. Manon died in the desert, it is true, but in the arms of the man who loved her with the whole energy of his soul, who, when she was dead, dug a grave for her and watered it with his tears and buried his heart in it, while Marguerite, a sinner like Manon, and perhaps converted like her, had died in a sumptuous bed, it seemed, after what I had seen, the bed of her past, but in that desert of the heart, a more barren, a vaster, a more pitiless desert than that in which Manon had found her last resting place. Marguerite, in fact, as I had found from some friends who knew of the last circumstances of her life, had not a single real friend by her bedside during the 2 months of her long and painful agony. Then from Manon and Marguerite my mind wandered to those whom I knew and whom I saw singing along the way, which led to just such another death. Poor souls! If it is not right to love them, is it not well to pity them? You pity the blind man who has never seen the daylight, the deaf who has never heard the harmonies of nature, the dumb who has never found a voice for his soul.